welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. Thanks for joining us today as we continue in season 5 of the Catholic Buzz. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Welcome to you, Josh.
Thank you very much.
And Matt Van Milligan.
Hello.
Welcome to you, Matt.
Thank you.
Well, it's obviously a new year. We're in this 2025 year. But over the Christmas holidays, something happened that doesn't usually happen in the life of the church. And that is the beginning of a Jubilee Year. And that started on Christmas Eve. Pope Francis began the Jubilee Year on that night on Christmas Eve. And it's going to actually continue until January of 2026.
Yeah, it gets 2 Christmas seasons, eh?
Yes.
Why is that? I like it. It's party time, but it's,
It's party time. and you'll see, I think it's to give people as much opportunity to celebrate the Jubilee Year, because we'll see as we talk about the Jubilee Year, there's a whole bunch of things that go along with the Jubilee Year. There's opening of holy doors. There's opportunities for reconciliation. There's opportunities for lots of different things that go along with a Jubilee Year, pilgrimages and all that stuff. Yeah. So this year, the theme of the Jubilee is the Jubilee Year of Hope.
Yeah.
So Pope Francis has declared that it's a Jubilee Year of Hope, and that's great.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think we have a crisis of hope in our world, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for the church to focus on hope for a Jubilee Year is really special. So today we're just going to talk about what is a Jubilee Year, because they don't happen all that often. So maybe some people listening, this is the first Jubilee Year they've ever heard of. Maybe for some people, they know the Jubilee Year happens every 25 years. Sometimes there's extraordinary Jubilee years that are called. So we'll unpack what a Jubilee Year means, but more importantly, what it means. It's nice for the Pope to celebrate a Jubilee Year, but all of us are supposed to be in this Jubilee Year mode this year. We're supposed to grow in hope. We're supposed to take advantage of the graces that come from the Jubilee Year. So let's break open sort of what the Jubilee Year is all about, because it has its roots, not something that Pope Francis just made up. It has its roots all the way back to the book of Leviticus.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you were talking about that there's a grace period built into the time frame of the Jubilee Year, that it extends beyond a year. That's really fitting with what the theme of a Jubilee is. That it's we have students who are you want an extension, you want to
Yes.
I didn't quite get all the things I wanted to get done in time. It's
Yeah.
no, it's you have a grace period. It is supposed to be a period of grace. You also said the 25-year time period. It happens every 25 years, and a lot of adults, if you're hearing this for the first time, it's this may be the first Jubilee year you've experienced in your adult life. And that's for the case for me as well. And it's interesting that it's not an arbitrary time frame. That it's no, it is actually supposed to represent a generational spirit, a generational attitude. Mm-hmm. So yes, back in Leviticus, the time frame was actually longer. So Leviticus 25 says, on the 50th year, you are to celebrate a jubilee. Yeah. And effectively, it wasn't a minor thing. It wasn't just a liturgical celebration. It was it involved kind of a reset of Jewish culture at the time. So the expectation was that anyone who was a slave, any indentured servants, would be freed. If there were any outstanding debts, they would be canceled. There would be, if any property was sold in that 50-year period, it would return to the original owners. It was in some respects a way of ensuring that no one person or one group within Jewish society accumulated, a disproportionate amount of wealth than anyone else. But there are all kinds of secondary requirements. People normally associate those kind of big three with it, but you weren't during that year allowed to buy or sell property. If you had, large fields, you wouldn't harvest them and store up in barns. You don't gather for yourself. Everyone had the opportunity to come and gather what they could. There's a command to take care of the poor. Make a special effort to take care of the poor. There was a command to return to your ancestral lands. So this is what's interesting for me, at least, about the 50-year time period, because it's not just a generation gap for, given life expectancy at the time, that's an
Double.
entire lifetime.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, it's interesting that that there was this insistence, and it's significant that it's in Leviticus as well. Like, this is given as the law. This isn't given as a recommendation, or like, no, this is built into the expectation of God forming His people and distinguishing the Israelites from the rest of the nations who weren't necessarily concerned with grace and taking care of the poor and all of these things that God was trying to instill in His people.
And in the same way, like the Jubilee year, even today, still follows some of the same sort of methods. Maybe we don't go and reclaim property that we've sold, but it is a year that we sort of focus on this reset, like this reclaiming for ourselves, a life of faith, canceling debts. There's a real focus on reconciliation, not only for yourself to be forgiven, and I know there's plenary indulgences granted during the Jubilee, make pilgrimages, go through the holy doors, all that stuff, but also this sort of focus on forgiving other people. Like forgiving people in your life that you haven't forgiven. So there's like the same sort of theme, and this you were talking about if you had slaves, they were freed. Well, I think that's the focus in Jubilee year, especially with this theme of hope. But any Jubilee is that we're freed from sort of the things that we've sort of taken for granted in our life and that have accumulated, that maybe prevent us from living out our spiritual life with great grace or with an open heart,
Yeah. I think it's cool too that, like you were saying, that this goes all the way back to Leviticus, but this is not anything new either, in the sense that, like, 7 has always been a holy number, and it's the 7th. So on the 7th day, God rested, and we were commanded that we keep the Sabbath day holy on the 7th day and all that kind of stuff. But that was actually built into this Jubilee idea, where it's 7 weeks, 7 days. Then we talked about 7 weeks. There goes into 7 years, and then 7 years, and so you're supposed to let the fields rest after on the 7th year. So you plant them. On the 7th year, you let them rest, and then the idea here is that it's 7 years times 7. And then that's the
It's
big,
49.
It's 49. And so then you have a Jubilee year.
Yes.
That's the 50th year. And so, and on that time is where things are supposed to rest. The 4 R's is what I have here. You have redemption, release, restoration, and rest. And so, your redemption is like you're going to be saved. You're going to be from your debt. You're going to be saved from your enslavement or whatever the case. Release, again, being released from your debt, really being released. What was the other ones? Release, restored. So that's where fields are being restored. The nutrients are going back in the ground and all that kind of stuff. And then the last one is rest. And so again, taking that time to kind of just be present in the moment and not just focus on work, not focusing on that, and that's, so Jubilee is taking all of that and from the little parts that we know, like once a week, we're supposed to take that day of rest, but expanding it into one huge year. And now that we're supposed to rest a whole entire year, but like you said, resting a field or not collecting the grain and putting it back into your barn, but just trusting that God is going to take care of it. And I think it was every 7 years. You're supposed to let on the 7th year, you gotta let it rest.
It's fallow. It's a fallow year.
But the 6th year, you will receive fullness. You will receive plentiful to even last you into the 9th year. You know what I mean? So there's enough there that you don't have to worry about that 7th year, because I'm going to give you enough. So there's a little bit of faith in there too. Yeah.
And then from Leviticus, like how did we get to celebrating the Jubilee year in the Christian faith, right? The first Jubilee year celebrated in Christianity was not till the year 1300.
Wow, yeah.
Right?
Okay, I didn't know that.
And Pope Boniface VIII, he fixed the Jubilee celebration to every 100 years. So it wasn't every 50 years. And then there was sort of a plea from the people of Rome to Pope Clement VI. This is in 1342. So the frequency was changed to 50 years, like the book of Leviticus. Yeah. And then in 1389, in remembrance of the number of years in the life of Christ, Pope Urban VI chose to set the Jubilee cycle to every 33 years because of the length of time that Jesus lived on this earth, right? And called for a Jubilee in 1390. It was like an extraordinary Jubilee, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I think it was 1450 was the last Jubilee that was celebrated on the 50-year cycle. And then Paul II extended the Jubilee period to 25 years, to every 25 years. So there was sort of a,
Who do
a
these popes owe
journey.
money to? That they're just trying to get, I'm kidding.
It's interesting that the first couple cycles there didn't actually make it to term.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, you called it? I'm going to call
Yeah,
it.
but before it got to that 100 year,
Yeah.
it was like, okay, actually it's
50.
50. Not even 50 years past.
33.
Okay, now it's 33.
I kind of picture
yeah.
like the excitement of the people.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
celebrate this Jubilee year, this focus on resetting, renewal, redemption, release, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like people's like, well, we don't want to wait another 100 years. Like we want another Jubilee year now. So you could see like the desire for people to celebrate a Jubilee. And I hope that us too can have that same desire, because we're kind of like, it's a Jubilee year.
Yeah.
But there is like a specific way for us to anticipate and to live out a Jubilee year.
And I think too, they probably saw the fruits of it. So they saw the fruits. So
Exactly.
why are we going to make them wait 100 years to get the
Yes.
same fruits again? Like see the same thing. And so in introducing it earlier it makes total sense to me. And I don't think it was just about debt. I do think it was really about probably seeing the fruits and seeing the goodness. And as you were saying, like keeping people in check, that not one person owned more than the other. So I think that makes. I wish we could go back to that right now. But it is a really interesting way for that all to kind of come about. But now that we're celebrating it every 25 years, I remember the 2000 Jubilee. I remember people got little stickers that they put on the doors. I don't know if you remember, like the little clear stickers that said Jubilee 2000 with a little cross and dove or something like that. Yeah. They stuck it on their doors. I remember my grandparents had one, and it was there until when I bought their house.
Now, that being said, that a Jubilee happens ordinarily
Every
25 years, popes have called an extraordinary Jubilee year. So it's outside of the 25-year cycle, but still a Jubilee year. For example, people might remember in 2016, the extraordinary year of mercy. So Pope Francis called an extraordinary Jubilee year of mercy that year. So a lot of focus on mercy, which is, really the theme of Pope Francis's pontificate, really, more chances for mercy, the better. So that was an extraordinary year of mercy. Also in 1983, off this 25-year schedule, John Paul II proclaimed a Jubilee to celebrate the 1950th anniversary of the death and resurrection of Jesus. So that probably in 2033, on the 2000th anniversary of Jesus' death and resurrection, we'll probably have another extraordinary year of Jubilee. But, we'll see. We're not declaring that today. We're not going to write a papal bull and send it to the Vatican. But
Start taking out loans now.
But okay, so now, that's sort of the history of the Jubilee. Now let's talk a little bit about sort of the practices. Now, part of a Jubilee year is making a pilgrimage, some sort of pilgrimage, right? And part of a pilgrimage is there are special graces that come from making a pilgrimage, to going to a destination, to praying about certain graces that someone wants to receive, right? And usually in a Jubilee year, there are what's called holy doors.
Yeah.
And Pope Francis opened the holy doors at the Vatican on Christmas Eve. And there's this practice of making a pilgrimage to a holy door, walking through the holy door, and of course making the requirements of making a good confession, receiving the Eucharist, and praying for the needs of the Pope. And people will receive a plenary indulgence from going through this practice of a pilgrimage and walking through the holy door. In the extraordinary Jubilee year of mercy, the Pope allowed for all these different holy doors in local areas to be present. So people might remember in their own diocese, there was a holy door, perhaps at the cathedral or whatever it might be, or certain parishes that were marked to be special Jubilee year parishes. This year, for the Jubilee Year of Hope, there's only 5 Jubilee holy doors, and they're all located in the city of Rome, which would make, put 2 and 2 together. This year to make a pilgrimage, the extraordinary year of Jubilee, people made pilgrimages to their cathedrals, to holy sites, shrines and things like that. Make a pilgrimage there, walk through the holy door. This year, I think there's an encouragement there of making a pilgrimage to a holy door in Rome, right?
Yeah.
Which is I think it's a beautiful thing, and they're going to be celebrating different jubilees throughout the year. You know, Jubilee of seniors, Jubilee of priests, Jubilee of youth, Jubilee of whatever it might be. So there'll be all these celebrations in the city of Rome throughout this year, where people will make pilgrimages and go and walk through these holy doors. Now, what happens if you can't travel to Rome and go through a holy door? Well, it's still, I think, a really good practice to make some sort of pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be local.
Yeah.
A pilgrimage is really a time where it's a prayerful experience with a destination in mind. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's really great too that you might look at only the only holy doors that are open are in Rome. This isn't a push for like tourism,
Right.
whatever. Like this isn't because the plenary indulgence is available to not just people who go to Rome. Like it's not just that, and it's a really good way of explaining indulgences to people who don't necessarily understand them because again, you have kind of the historical conception or misconception about indulgences that it's just kind of this spiritual vending machine. It's like, no, but like there are tangible graces that are tied to specific activities, and a pilgrimage is one. That it is that you deliberately set apart the time, like it's fitting with what a jubilee is. That you're not like you're stepping out of the rat race. You're stepping out of the cycle of acquisition and all of these things that, for the most part, occupy our attention, our time, and our priorities. That to make a pilgrimage, you have to recognize, with your time and with your effort and your attention, this is important. I'm actually seeking a spiritual destination, and I'm actually pursuing tangible grace. And that, the proper outcome of that is, that plenary indulgence, that, you actually receive spiritual graces for the upbuilding of your spiritual life.
Yeah, and there's no money involved in this. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. I mean,
Yeah.
there is because you're traveling and you're doing that stuff, and sure, tourism and stuff. But really, like a lot of times, like when we're talking about a pilgrimage is all about your heart. And a lot of times, you're fasting during pilgrimages, or you're like, I know the pilgrimage that walks from Powassan all the way to Midland Shrines and stuff, and that they're walking the entire time that they're there. It's not a while it is it's an experience. It's a good experience probably for most people. It's not like a party feast time, get on the party bus type thing and kind of go from there. It is walking. There is struggle involved. We're doing a pilgrimage with the youth. We're taking them down to Rome this year. And one of the things, as much as it's going to be fun, we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm not looking forward to being crowds of millions stuck in the streets of Rome. Like it's not going to be that fun for me. But I'm looking forward to it for the experience that it's going to be and for the awesomeness of watching a million people hit their knees when Eucharistic adoration happens, or everybody sharing faith from around the world. But the pilgrimage part, there is struggle. Like it's going to be super hot, it's going to be super long waiting in lines, super long, fasting from certain things and that kind of thing. So it's interesting. Pilgrimage is really awesome for your soul. It's never necessarily about fun.
The Pope released a papal bull announcing the Jubilee Year called Spes non confundit, which means hope does not disappoint, which is from St. Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 5. And in it, he talks about, this idea of pilgrimage, the spiritual sense of pilgrimage, right? But also he talks about that part of hope is that together he's encouraging all people of goodwill to live in the now. Like he talks about how our digital use of media is interrupting sort of the flow of interpersonal communications and relationships, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So if we're going to restore hope, that means being with one another, like being with each other and living life with each other, living in the now in every moment. So that's one of the focuses that he talks about in his papal bull. The other thing that he talks about besides pilgrimage, is reconciliation. That goes along with the now, like living in the now. Like how many people just avoid one another or move past sort of things and don't really deal with reconciliation. But that's part of living in the now, is like life is messy, but God gives us a hope that does not disappoint, right? That God helps us in moments of our life to help us reconcile, to help us move forward, and to help us at the end of the day, be better disciples of Jesus. Like that's the whole point, right? And so he's also talking in this bull about this renewal in each one of us to be faithful to God, right? And it goes along with the original idea of what a jubilee is. This time of, this fallow time where we kind of separate from everything that's going on.
Restoration.
Yeah, and we try and restore and reinvigorate ourselves to live a faithful life,
Redeem,
in the spiritual life, right? So part of it is difficult times, like maybe if someone's going to make a pilgrimage with millions of people. If someone can't go on a pilgrimage to Rome but can do something locally. But one thing I think is important is that every parish, every Catholic church, every Catholic community, every prayer group, every Catholic group should do something to mark the Jubilee year this year, because I think it's an opportunity for renewal that not everyone takes advantage of, right? And the church presents these things. I always find that these moments in our life that the church presents us come at the right time, come at the right time in people's lives, right? And so to people to reflect on themselves, like what is it that needs renewal in my life this year? The church gives people so much opportunity to be restored, renewed, to find grace. You talked about like, why is it over 2 Christmas periods? That's like this idea of like, we're going to give you every chance to do something good over this period, over this Jubilee year. Like the church is always giving us opportunities to do that. It's often us that don't take advantage of those moments, right?
Yep, agreed.
Like if we're going to go back to the origins of the Jubilee year, right from the book of Leviticus, like what slave would be like, nah, it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to be freed right now. Or, what person would say, now's not the time to have my debts forgiven. Like that just doesn't make sense. Right. So if that's the root of a Jubilee year, then for us ourselves to reflect on that, like, are we going to participate in a Jubilee year? Are we going to go all in and really be people like, what does the Lord have in store for me this Jubilee? Why is the church celebrating? Like, make it personal for each one. Like, what in my own personal life journey could be restored this coming Jubilee? I think it's really important for everyone to sort of figure that out, because, the worst things that could happen is these opportunities come and then they go. And, like, who knows if I'm going to be alive for the next Jubilee or whatever it might be, right? But now is the moment. Now is the moment for us to realize that Christ wants to be part of our life in so many beautiful ways. And oftentimes we don't turn to him because of fear or anxiety or worry or busyness or you name it, right? And that's why this theme for the Jubilee, hope doesn't disappoint. It's like, what is the source of our hope? It's Jesus Christ, right? And Christ never disappoints in our life, right? And the church gives us this beautiful opportunity. And I think each one of us should really reflect on how we can make the most of this Jubilee year for our own personal lives.
You were talking about the theme of kind of reconciliation and restoration. Like that 25-year cycle is actually really, really interesting for, for communities and for families. And because like 25-year period, like that's a generational difference. The next on-cycle Jubilee, my children are going to be adults. Like this like, so when you hit a Jubilee year, like you're probably close to the age your parents were at the previous one. So just like if over that 25-year period, resentments have been allowed to kind of build up, or these kinds of like, you know what, I can cut my parents a little bit of slack because I'm there now. I can see these are the stresses they were dealing with. It's an opportunity to reflect, to pursue kind of healing in your communities, in your families, in those relationships.
I was reading. It's kind of funny they say that too, because I was reading a couple of papers on the Jubilee, and these are people that wrote their PhD thesis or whatever else on Jubilee, and the themes kept popping up. And it is this the fruits or the goods of a Jubilee year are 4 Fs is what they call it. So we had the R's that we have to do, the action that we have to take, but then there was the 4 Fs, and it was freedom. Well, that makes sense if you're released from the bonds or released from whatever. Forgiveness, again, forgiveness of debts and whatever else. Family. and fullness. And so if you're looking at like what you're talking about is family right there, is forgiveness and freedom from debts, but also from things that might have plagued you in the past, whatever it might be. It might even be freedom from sin. It might be freedom from addiction. It might be freedom from like, what is it that you're going to make this Jubilee about? But get that freedom now. And then on the opposite side of that, you have family, which we were talking about, but then fullness. And fullness is what we talked about kind of before, is having that rest period and not having to trust. Having to trust that God's just going to keep the barns full, keep that fruit is always going to be there. You don't have to, you're having faith, and in that hope and in that faith is the fullness. And so you get from doing all these actions and from experiencing the fullness of the Jubilee, the Jubilee itself, taking it to full action, you're receiving fullness in your own spirituality and stuff. And so looking at all those things, going from family, forgiveness, freedom, from whatever it might be, and then and all of those, you get all of that stuff at a Jubilee year, making sure that you're taking the proper steps for that. Who doesn't want any of those things, right? Like,
Exactly.
I'll take it all, right?
So let's say you're someone at home, not going to Rome this year, you know, and you want to celebrate something for the Jubilee. Number one, I would say if something is not happening in your parish right now, like, talk to your pastor about celebrating the Jubilee with great excitement and do honor for a Jubilee year, right? But personally, it would be great to reflect on frequency of confession. This is a Jubilee year where debts are forgiven. How often am I going to confession? What's my attitude towards confession? And can I, take advantage of that sacrament a little more? Reviewing things like, I might be faithful to Sunday Mass. If not, that's something definitely to get back on track. But if I am faithful to Sunday Mass, what else can I be doing during the week? Maybe I could start the practice of a time of adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. If not once a week, once a month. There's a church near you that has adoration times. If we don't have a devotion to Mary or the saints or things like that, something that we can pick up if we're not praying the rosary. And then different opportunities for us. Maybe, for us in Northern Ontario, when the weather gets nicer, a pilgrimage. Walk from one church to the other. Walk from, your home to the nearest adoration chapel, or
take a special trip to another town where there is a holy site that you've always wanted to visit, or that, and make it about a specific intention. And so, like, going to St. Joseph's Oratory in Montreal, or going to Midland Shrines, or going to like you can suggest like from Sudbury, going to the Pro Cathedral, going to the cathedral here in town that's about an hour and a half away, or vice versa. Like finding maybe a place in your diocese, maybe a place in the next town over, or a couple of towns over. Make a pilgrimage somewhere. You don't have to. I mean, the requirement for this thing is for the Jubilee is supposed to be about the holy doors, but the pilgrimage is still a trip that's worth doing to a site, whatever the site is for you. I mean, you're not going to get necessarily the same thing as a Jubilee year pilgrimage that they're suggesting, but you are going to get something out of it. Definitely.
Yeah, and there are graces. There are graces from a pilgrimage, right? You don't have to walk through a holy door to get a plenary indulgence. You can get plenary indulgences in other ways as well. But parishes, I know in our diocese, the bishop has asked parishes to increase times of confession, increase times of celebrations, to look at other ways where people can find certain graces, right? In our parish, we've started the first Saturday devotions. That's something that's new. We're going to increase confession times. We're doing little prayer times throughout the year. So like lots of things that we're going to increase when we offer the sacrament of the sick and all these different things. So those are things that parishes can do, but that people can be part of. It's about taking our Christian responsibility serious. And remember, all for the fruits of it. The fruits is the point, right? This year, 2025, is also the 1,700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea. Of course, where the Nicene Creed came from. Maybe that's something that people can do. Pray the Nicene Creed every day. Recite it. Parishes can recite the Nicene Creed on Sunday instead of the Apostles' Creed in Canada. Like different things that that we can do to mark those things, right? So this is a significant year for the life of the church, but it's only as significant as it's only as significant in our lives as we allow it to be.
As we choose to invest into it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we picked up the Saturday. My boys and I decided that we're going to do the first Saturday practices, and I love like the idea that you were talking about before is you're going to the promises that come from Our Lady of Fatima with the first Saturday practices. You go to mass, you say the rosary, you meditate on the mysteries of the rosary for 15 minutes, and then you also go to confession. Well, those are all really good things. Like me and my boys decided, okay, let's pick this up, let's do it, and so we started on the first Saturdays. Well, that means we're going to go to confession once a month, which is not necessarily our practice. You know what I mean? And so that's really nice. And then going to an extra mass a week is not a bad thing either, right? Going to a first Saturday mass and then meditating upon the rosaries. I'm really enjoying. If people haven't figured it out yet, there's another podcast. There's the Rosary in a Year, and they're starting to learn how to pray the rosary properly, how to meditate on the rosary and stuff. And if you haven't looked at it or talked about it, go back on it. It's by Essential Possessed, just like Bible in a Year, Catechism in a Year. Rosary in a Year is the one they started, and it's not Father Mike Smith, it's by Father Mark Mary. But it's decent. It's a meditation. I'm really enjoying the meditation part of it because I haven't yet prayed the rosary with the ideas that I picked up from it. But it is an idea of, okay, I'm dedicating every day 15 minutes, or I'm going to learn more about mysteries of the rosary, how to meditate on the rosary, that type of stuff. And then I'll take that and then go pray the rosary on my own and put that knowledge I've learned to practice. And so that's one of the things that, I'm doing, but that's, it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. And if you're praying the rosary with young children, you can extend that to about 2.5 hours.
Yes. So true.
Yeah.
Or go with just one decade.
So this is the beginning of the Jubilee year. It's about discovering a renewed sense of hope, a renewed sense of faith, and really just to receive all the graces and fruits from the Jubilee year. So it's only beginning. We have a whole year ahead of us of this Jubilee year. So let's pray that the Lord has great things in store for us over the Jubilee year. So let's pick something to do for the Jubilee year. Maybe you want to share that with us. You can send us an email at askus@thecatholicbuzz.com, or you can comment here on this video or the audio podcast as well. So that's all the time we have today. So for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milgen, my name is Father Daniele. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.